What is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Welcome to the show, gang. Happy hump day, middle of the week. Big Wednesday slates on tap. Different size slates depending on where you're playing. Some really good looking tournaments going on, though, on both sites. FanDuel's got a biggie going. They've also got a $15 with $100K up top to first place with each of them. A bunch of vouchers went out. I got one for the $150 myself, so I'll be jumping into that one. Usual lower end contests as far as a very good $3 that they're running pretty regularly. Nice access point. You know, there's a lot of common dollars and quarter entry tournaments, but that $3 with $10K up top, not a bad little contest. It reminds me of some of the contests back several years ago, where it was just kind of an affordable point of entry with a reasonable payout. Obviously, the payout structures go better when they're doing those 50% guaranteed payouts and everything. But some really interesting contests. And then DK's got a biggie up. They've got a $5 100K to first tonight. 90 some odd thousand people in it, but look like a really good contest. Different shaped tournaments across both sites. FanDuel has all 11 games all night. DraftKings went with an 8-gamer. They chopped off the last 3. So we'll see some differences as same with the last time. When we had this situation, we've got some blank spots. We'll have to wrestle with that a little bit back and forth on our sheet here. We got some really good looking stuff. Really looking forward to talking this one through. Cujo's here. Happy hump day, buddy. I'm a loser till I win the millie. DK all day. Yeah, that DK tournament, big as it is, 90 some odd thousand entries. It's a really appealing tournament for $5. So definitely a nice spot to jump in on that one. And okay. Got an update on my phone. I thought it was news. I think we're up to speed with all the news. We'll start there. So we got in the 330, LeBron James went down from just regular active to probable. D'Angelo Russell got upgraded to probable, and Austin Reeves got upgraded from probable to available. So just keep an eye on the Lakers. Other probables, in addition to LeBron and D'Lo, Sammy Hauser is probable, and then Austin Reeves, like I mentioned, is now available. Questionables, DeAndre Hunter again, Miles Turner, Micic from Charlotte. Josh Hart is questionable again, but the Knicks took that right up to the tip the other day without actually telling us anything. They said he was going to be a game-time decision, and then it just kind of went down to the wire, and I didn't see any kind of reporting, and he was in the starting lineup. So I expect Hart's going to be out there. They might continue to list him questionable for a little bit, but unless we see him actually sit, I'm not going to be that concerned about Hart. So I'm kind of considering him full go. Josh Richardson's questionable. Zach Edey's questionable. John Conchar. John Morant is another biggie. Goga Bitadze, Jonathan Isaac, and Jalen Smith all continue to be questionable. And then a whole big long list of people who are already out. Known knowns on the outs. Dominic Barlow, Bogdan Bogdanovic, Kobe Buffkin, Dyson Daniels, Vic Krejci, Cody Zeller, Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Kyle Kuzma, Kristaps Porzingis, James Wiseman, Najee Thompson, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Jalen Hood-Schifino, Christian Coloco, Jared Vanderbilt, Christian Wood, Craig Porter Jr., Max Strus, JT Thor, Scotty Barnes, Bruce Brown, Kelly O, Emmanuel Quickley's doubtful, but going to be out. Daquan Jeffries, Brandon Miller, Mark Williams, Precious Achua, Mitch Robinson, Kevin Love, Gigi Jackson, Luke Kennard, Vince Williams Jr., Lonzo Ball, Trey Jones, Devin Vassell, Isaiah Hartenstein, Jalen Williams with an IN rather, Kenrich Williams, Shaden Sharp, Matisse Thybulle, Robert Williams III, Mo Bamba, Kawhi Leonard, and PJ Tucker are all out for this slate. No real crazy surprises in there. I think we had eyeballs on all of that stuff. Some missing pieces are definitely going to make Atlanta very interesting, especially if DeAndre Hunter doesn't play. They had some interesting value pieces hit the board the other day. So a lot of moving parts on that front. As far as the Vegas board goes for this one. Oh, you know what? I forgot to update it on the sheet you guys can see. I'm just going to read through it. I forgot to put it on the sheet you guys can actually see, and I'm not gonna switch them. Detroit at Philly, 4-point spread there, favoring the hometown Philly team. 219-point total. Not the most appealing game. You know, for a 8-game slate on DK and 11-game slate on FanDuel, we're mostly working at the top with the starters and just the very top end of the benches anyway. So among some of the starters from these teams, you can grab some pieces and parts. We'll see how they simmed out, but that game environment overall, just not the most appealing one on the board. Toronto, 6.5-point dogs going into Charlotte with some missing pieces, 225-point total there. Two kind of mediocre teams, but that's an okay enough game total, and we'll see what the value pricing looks like. I think RJ was going to be pretty highly owned on the DK slate. We'll see how he came up in sims against the ownership. I haven't really looked through the sim results yet. I just reran them before and popped them in, so we'll take a look. We'll find out together. Lakers and the Cavs, 4.5-point spread in the Cavs' favor. That probably swings even further if LeBron doesn't go. 225.5 points on the board there. Definitely appealing not role players, but appealing top-end players in their usual roles across that game. And then some appealing mid-range type guys in the 5s and 6s. Some coming from the Lakers. More from the Lakers. I think it's more top-end on the Cavs. Celtics and the Pacers, kind of an interesting one. Celtics favored by 6.5 on the road. 234.5 point total is the top mark on the entire slate. So that's tops for both the full 11 games on FanDuel. Tops of the entire day. Definitely a lot of pieces on that one. The two obvious guys on Boston and then some of their role players. Sam Hauser most likely going to be back is kind of maybe interesting. Indy always provides just kind of mid-board type guys. We'll see if anybody really crashed the top of the 150 results, the optimal results. Josh Down status changed from healthy to questionable. Irrelevant. But I do think we'll see some, just based on that game total and the overall environment there, I think we'll see some Celtics, some Pacers land on the board on both sides. Hawks and the Wizards, another big total, 233 points on that one. The Wizards are 5-point dogs at home. Not the best game overall between like the quality of the two teams. But we've got a couple usable parts. Definitely some missing pieces from the Wiz is going to feed some value into the slate. Kuzma, most notably. So, yeah, an appealing total at 233 is the second highest overall total on the slate. Atlanta, again, is also going to be providing some potential value. We'll keep an eye on the status of DeAndre Hunter. And we know where some of the values are on that team already because we've used them already. Knicks in the Heat, a low-end game, 215.5 points, just a 1.5-point spread favoring the Knicks on the road. That's going to be one of those Knicks-Heat just fist-fight type games. There will be pieces that you can get to. I think at price, some of the Knicks will look okay. We'll probably end up ahead of the field, but I don't think it's going to be a runaway train of Knicks ownership in this one, especially with the size of this slate. But some decent pieces on that side. And then really it's just the top end of Miami if you're taking anything, but I'm not even sure we get to that. Magic and the Bulls. Paolo Banchero playing out of his mind to start the season. He is going to, I'm sure, look good when we pull up the results. Some definite pieces on the Magic side of that one. There's usable parts on the Bulls. We've gotten to some Giddey. We've gotten to some Levine early in the season, but not enamored with that team overall. 229.5 point total, though, is going to push some relevance into that one. Ugly game, Brooklyn and Memphis. 12-point spread, 226-point total. A lot of working parts in that game. Some of it is going to hang on John Morant's status. Again, he's questionable for this one. We saw him miss the other day, and Scottie Pippen went out and had a day. That was one of the ones that we were targeting and we talked about during the show. If Ja doesn't play, this is the direct move that you want to make. I think it would be very much that situation again. San Antonio and OKC, another 12-point game, 12.5 points favoring OKC at home, 221-point total. That OKC team is very, very good from the Spurs side. You know, Wemby, maybe some Sohan if the price falls correctly. And then we saw Chet have a couple explosive games already this season. We'll take a look at him. We'll take a look at some of the other odds and ends from the Thunder. Not sure how much that one feeds in, though, with a big point spread and that low-ish total. 218-point total between the Pellies and the Dubs. 2.5 points favoring Golden State. Ugly rotation there. We talked about it yesterday with some of the guys that were missing. As far as just that team seems to have a goal of playing everybody around 30 minutes. I think 2 of them got over 30 yesterday with the shorthanded team, but I think we're just kind of ducking back into that 30-ish for everybody kind of a territory. It is a close game. There are usable parts. New Orleans is always going to offer you the top end of McCollum and Zion and those guys. We'll see how they math out, but nobody in that group was really looking like a priority as I was putting together projections. And then the nightcap, Portland and the Clips, 8.5 points favoring LA, 219.5 point total there. Portland just a really ugly team. And the Clippers not that far out ahead of them. I don't know if we got to very much of anything from that game. Let's see. Yeah, well, that game's not on the DK slate. On FanDuel, we got some Norm Powell at 27% and some James Harden, who's just, the top piece in that game. And, nothing else really looks relevant. So, kind of an ugly nightcap in the end game. Jump back in here. Whoops. Didn't realize I had the YouTube tab open. Ooh, Dodgers lineup is in. I think that's the same. Let me just... Bear with me one sec. I just want to toss this up on the site for the baseball folks. If you're new, rotoscouts.com. Basketball projections are live. World Series projections tonight are live. And NHL projections for a solid little 6-game slate on the NHL. But obviously a very key World Series game tonight. Yanks looking to be the first ever team that was down 3-0 to force a Game 6. I just want to get the confirmed. I'm pretty sure they're the exact same lineups. But I just want to make sure. And then we'll dive into this NBA slate. We'll look at all those sim results that you guys are staring at, probably screaming things at me as I was doing that breakdown from another sheet without looking at the chat. Half a second. Hit the like button while you're here. Subscribe while you're here. So all that stuff that I was just mentioning at Roto Scouts, the point that I was going to try and make there is that you can access all of those sports, every single one of them, no hidden fees, every data point, every piece of content that we've got for under $1 a day, all in on every single plan. Trying to provide you guys the best possible value. Keep everything really light. Take your money and put it into contests. That's what I want you guys doing because that's what equals winning. So we're just taking a little tiny bit for the effort. But let me get that loaded up to the site. Also, check out our sim partners over at acemind.io. These guys are doing great work. We're going to be looking at all their sim results. That's the tool that I use to create these data points that we look at here. Projections. This is such a process. Once I added the download CSV function, which hopefully is working for people, it's just an additional couple clicks that I have to make on each upload. It's a pain in the ass. That, click here. Oh, we're so close to being done. The file's open. Urgh. How you guys doing out there? How's everybody's week going? Good work weeks? Any good DFS results? Okay, and we'll update the timestamp to 4:15. All right, baseball's updated. Let's jump into this thing. Sabonis basically had a triple-double in the first quarter, and if it weren't for the blowout, he would have had 80 DK points. Yeah, Jokic ended up having a pretty solid day after we talked about him. He was off to a slow-ish start. It was funny. Somebody mentioned it in the Discord, and he had, I think it was 12, 9, and 9 with 7 minutes left in the third. And somebody was like, oh, that looks like kind of a low-end day for... Just realizing my logo and my contact stuff changed up there. That's weird. Something happened to my banners. Oh, well. But yeah, and then he obviously continued that kind of a pace and put up the biggest score of the slate. I'm a loser till I win the Millie says, when Bronny has a good game with his dad, the jersey swap will be iconic. Yeah, I figure Bronny gets in for a couple of minutes today, Cleveland game. They're going to want to make sure that he gets on the court for that, I think. But not going to be an impact. Cooge made a little bit last night. Good. I'm a loser till I win the millie. Before we start, hopefully this isn't too late. You asked that question 13 minutes ago, but who is the best overall play on DraftKings? Honestly, it looks like it's, and I was not prepared to make this my answer, Anthony Davis. Not only is he one of the top projected or the top projected overall player on this slate on DK, we got him a monster share. Nearly 50% across the top 150, well above the field. I wasn't ready to make that the starting point of this discussion, but obviously that is coming through very, very strong. He's only 10-2 center only on DraftKings, center and power forward on FanDuel. You can see the difference. For 11-2 over there, we only got 11.3% of him. That's still above the field, but he's looking like a monster on DraftKings. 1.62 DK points per minute this season, 1.68 on FanDuel. Last year he was a 1.51 per minute player. I have him, that projection is in last year's range. So that's a significant piece with potential ceiling on top of it. If LeBron doesn't go, he gains additional, well, it's difficult to fully say that. I mean, he would gain additional, a little bit of just you're the guy who has to do everything now, and probably goes from the 29.9% usage that he's got to, mid-30s usage for the game. So there would be a little bit of an uptick, but also taking LeBron off takes their best facilitator off the court too. So there's a little bit of a downturn with that as well. But he's looking like a big piece on DraftKings right now. It's going to be again, a weird sort as we go through these, and we got to do it. Let's see. If I take the positions from DraftKings, I'll lose all those FanDuel players, so I can't do that. So we got to use FanDuel positioning because that's the one that covers everybody. So we're dropping down to the guards. All right, we're going to try and do this in the... Oh, power. Hell yeah. Go Yanks. No gentleman's sweep. Yeah, so that's what I was saying before was Yanks will be, if they, assuming the win tonight, Garrett Cole on the mound going up against Jack Flaherty. Tough game. That'll be the first time a team forces game 6 out of... And I was wrong. It was 24 times, but it was 21 times teams got swept. Only 3 times have they even forced this game, which is wild. So, starting with guys who are on the FanDuel slate at the guard position, but not on the DK slate, so that we can just wipe out this top section here and then start in a more sane sense. James Harden. We got him 16.6% of the time. That is significantly below the field. Got him at just a 4.84 value score, regardless of the near 45-point raw total. He doesn't look like a great per dollar piece. He's put up a 1.29 per minute on the season. He's seeing a monster 34% usage rate with no Kawhi out there. That's up from the 20% that he was at throughout last year. So it's a big bump, and I do like him to land in that range of the median with a little bit of potential upside on it. But we're getting him significantly lower than the field there. Still a decent chunk at 15%. Nothing wrong with it. But don't love the Harden play as far as getting aggressive about it. I think the undercut is warranted there. And then Buddy Hield. Definitely upside for Buddy. 28 minutes last night. 36.7 FanDuel points. Could come right back to that kind of output. Significant usage so far this season, 27.8. That's up about 10 points. He's put up a 1.42 per minute. As we looked at yesterday, there's no way in hell that he lasts around that kind of a scoring average for the season. But just is who he is since 6,000, both guard spots, 5+ in the value scale. We got to him 17% of the time. That's above the field. If you want to take him 20, 25, I have no issues with it. Norm Powell at 27%, basically level with the field from that Clippers team. No issues. 0.94 per minute this season, but in truth, he's more like the 0.77 that we had from him last year. Even if you're getting around that range, he can be okay. 23.2 FanDuel minute points in 28 minutes. That's about that kind of a range, though. So bear in mind that you're somewhat likely to book that kind of a score. We've got him projected for 5 additional minutes beyond that, so he does have a little upside. Podziemski from Golden State, 8% exposure to him. He was a little bit ahead of the field. 33.5 minutes last night, 39.1 FanDuel points. 18.2% usage on the season, putting up 0.89, essentially the same output that he was putting up last year. So that would tell me that there's, with the 4 additional points of usage, there is, if the shot's falling, an upside toward 1 fantasy point per minute with this player, and we just saw it. So no issues going to that one. Outside of that, 4% Jordan Hawkins is a dart throw with a little bit of scoring-based upside. Chris Paul, 1%. Nobody else even above 2%. So let's scroll back down. That was just the games. That's for the 3 late games. Now starting with the games that are on both sites. And bear in mind, we're sorted by this. It's so messy. And we might be missing guys from the guard, just depending. Again, we're sorted by FanDuel positioning, just so that we can put everything on the slate. It's not my fault these slates are running different slates. I'm trying my best to put it together a sane dashboard and a conversation for you guys. Dennis Schroeder looks great again at the top. Monster performance last night, 41.6 minutes, put up 46 FanDuel points. That's better than a point per minute. He's been at a 1.02 FanDuel, 1.10 DraftKings pace so far. Last year it was a 0.90 FanDuel, higher 0.9s on DraftKings. He's definitely a very playable piece. We're getting him significantly above the field on both sides. 32% exposure in our top 150 on FanDuel. 46% exposure in the top 150 on DraftKings. Looks like just going right back to him makes a ton of sense. 59 at both guard spots on DK. 63 point guard only on FanDuel, but he's making it work. Definitely. I hate going to him. Like I said yesterday, I've gotten burnt by this player so many times, but he has been just flat out good out of the gate this season. He's seen plenty of opportunity, plenty of minutes. So I have no real issues going right back to the well. It's just going to be a matter of going to it until both the price goes up and he burns us, which is in the mail. The price is going to go up very soon. He's at 63.59. He'll be in the 6s on DK. FanDuel will probably juice him into the 7 range if he puts up another biggie. Trey Mann on a big uptick in usage, 18.3% usage last year, has been up to 25% so far this year. Interesting piece, 5,700. We barely got him on FanDuel. Not barely. We got him 13% on the top 150. But against the field's number, that's light. That's a significant undercut to the field on FanDuel. He's totally playable over there, and he's given us a additional tenth of a point per minute based on that uptick in usage, 1.02 this year, 0.92 last year. On DraftKings, he's a 1.08 player, and he only costs 5,000 at both guard spots. Significant DraftKings piece today. Trey Mann popping up in 45.3% of the top 150. That's ahead of the field. It's not as aggressively ahead of the field as we are on Dennis Schroeder and on Andrew Nembhard in the next spot. Similar ownership on all 3 guys. Those look like the key, if you want to say, core. That is a pretty key core across 3 of your guard spots. All 3 guys play both guard spots. So getting at least 2 of those 3 guys, if not all 3 of those guys into a lineup on DK seems pretty significant. Seems like a pretty strong approach. Nembhard's only 44. 26-point projection, nearly a 6 on the value scale, which probably makes him, as I'm eyeballing this, I believe that's the highest value number at the guard spot. He's just a 0.70 per minute player on DraftKings, 0.69 on FanDuel, but last year, 0.78, had a little bit more meat on the bone. But he's a 16.9% usage guy. 16.1% usage last year. We're up slightly, but that's negligible. He's made 11% of his 2 threes per game. He's just a moderate scorer. He's a decent assist man. 28.9% assist rate, but that only amounts to 2.3 assists per game so far in his limited time. 28.1 minutes a game, 33 minutes played the last time out. I keep forgetting I added a column, and these are in different spots visually. 30 minutes in the per game over the first 4, 33.7 the last time out, put up 28.1 FanDuel points. That is very, very much an Andrew Nembhard game. Mamba's saying, just for the record, it's Wemby. Not giving out any more free winners or value. All right, we'll get to Wemby in a little bit. Mamba, he's apparently LeBron's a little under the weather. It was just an illness pop up to the probable or downgrade from active to probable. I have every expectation that LeBron James suits up. And keep in mind, this is a player that they used to list as questionable or probable for every single game just out of habit. So I have no issues with LeBron probable. I'm almost positive he'll play. Oh, I hadn't seen that, Power. Thank you for noting that before. So CJ McCollum out, Herb Jones out, and Jordan Hawkins a game time decision. So that'll shake things up. And that'll shake things up at the guard spot. Damn, I wish we had that news just before the show, not just after. I already had Hawkins at 30 minutes. Where are the rest of those New Orleans guys? So CJ wasn't looking like a factor anyway. Hawkins was just a moderate one, but if he gets a push, he might land in more lineups for 5,000 shooting guard only. We'll deal with that. It's an impact only to the FanDuel slate. So we're just going to kind of press on, and then with where that one comes up on the schedule, just wait until the update for projections comes out. But yeah, that'll shake things up a little bit with some of these values at the guard spots on FanDuel, but not much based on the fact that those guys weren't really coming up anyway. If we had 33% CJ McCollum, we'd probably be rerunning this sim right now for FanDuel. But good note. I appreciate it. Always shout those things out. Coulibaly, Jordan Poole, both looking pretty decent from Washington. Going to be plenty to do for everybody on Washington. No Kuzma today. Coulibaly landed in 33.3% of the top 150. That's basically level with the field on DraftKings. Where we got more of them was as a shooting guard at 5,600 on the FanDuel slate. 38% and well above the field over there. 5.14 value score. It's been a 0.79 per minute player on 17% usage. That's up basically 4 points of usage. Hasn't really put up, a uptick in output commensurate with that additional couple of points of usage. But that's probably in the mail. We probably see him get into the 0.8s range. Good enough value at 56 that he's landing in a lot of lineups. And then Jordan Poole comes up as the opposite. Jordan Poole, 30% exposure on FanDuel, but significantly below the field. He is a major piece of chalk on the FanDuel slate. 7,600, both guard spots. Going to be out there chucking for sure. 23.4% usage rate in normal situations. It was 25.6 last year, and I'm sure he'll have a green light to do what he does. 32.9 minutes played the other day, put up 37.7 FanDuel points. He's been at 1.28 per minute over the course of the season, 1.30 on DraftKings. It's just him and the way his value hits those positions, bouncing off of his popularity as far as the undercut goes. But again, we're over a quarter of all lineups on FanDuel. We're just under a quarter of all lineups on DraftKings in our top 150. 24% over there with a haircut from the field. Significantly below the field, but definitely still want to have him. If you wanted to push that up closer toward the field, you're just buying bad value, right? You're buying negative leverage. The raw scoring potential would be there. And if you're gaining your leverage somewhere else, using a value piece somewhere else, whatever the case may be, then perfectly fine to increase a few shares just on raw scoring expectation. There's nothing wrong at all with the player. I've got him at nearly 40 DraftKings points tonight. Jalen Suggs, 23% DK, just 1% on FanDuel. Not a FanDuel play at all. Oh, wow, that's a big price difference. All right, 6,700 against the FanDuel cap. Both guard positions, we barely got him at all. Level with the field at 1.3%. On the DK slate for 55 at point guard, that's a significant piece. We're level with the field, 23.3%. It's not my favorite game environment on the board. Suggs is a good enough player, though. If you wanted to grab a couple additional shares, no real problem. He was a 0.91 guy last season. He's been at 1.35 DraftKings points, 1.32 FanDuel points. So the expectation is the output comes down. But in 35 minutes the other day, he got 45.5 FanDuel points against a not imposing Chicago team. He could come out and give you a decent game, and the value is correct on DraftKings. Not at all on FanDuel. He's mispriced on FanDuel. Trey, big piece on the FanDuel slate. Nearly 35% of them. Love that. 50 point upside. 50 point is a median. 20% on DraftKings. That's below the field, but he's a significant contributor. A lot of missing pieces from Atlanta. Trey's going to be out there doing his thing. His usual output is on a 30% usage rate. Any given slate, Trey could go out there and just fire away and give us more than what he's given us so far. Right now, we're right about last year's average. 127 last year, 129 this year. Nothing exceptional. Well, Nothing strange about the exceptional output that we've gotten from Trey, I think is the correct way to say that. Just meeting expectations with upside, with ceiling. 9,800 looks like one of the top pay-up options on FanDuel, and 99 on DraftKings doesn't hit the board quite as hard. That is below the field, but we still did get 20%. So, keep in mind, even though this is an undercut to the field, it's not a totally aggressive one, and we still do have him in 1 out of 5 lineups. Cody Martin, just a moderate square on FanDuel, sub 5 value, 3% of lineups, level with the field, but on DK, around 19%, level with the field as well. He's a $4,000 just value square, shooting guard, small forward eligibility. It's been a 0.73 per minute player. It's right around where I've got him projected today in 28 minutes. He was a 0.80 player last year. He's a low usage rate guy. So it's just about how that salary bounces off positioning and what else it buys you. He's a lever today. He's not a go-to guy that you're going to expect a monster score from, but median plus 5 or 6 as a ceiling is probably about right. But definitely looks like a playable part around 20%, around 1 in 5 on DraftKings. LaMelo looking like a much bigger piece on FanDuel, 33% of him. He's point guard only, so we're probably going to see a fair amount of LaMelo and Trey point guard pairings on the FanDuel slate. I have no issues with that. We're above the field on both of those guys. They're both extreme high volume guys. They're both extreme high output guys. LaMelo, 34.4% usage, 31.5 last year. This year so far, we're up by a tenth of a FanDuel point per minute. On DraftKings, we got LaMelo, but we got him way below the field. 15% exposure in our top 150. Again, not nothing, but that's below. That's a pretty big haircut, one of the more substantial ones that we've seen against the field based on how that's shaded. If you're new, multiple shading going on in these above or below the field columns. The red background is going to tell you how substantial the difference between our 15% and what the field is at. And then the directional arrow is going to tell you the same thing. I forget how it works. There's degrees in here. I'm trying to show the undercut, the degree of the undercut, all at the same time here. I forget exactly how I programmed it. But Baron, that's what I'm trying to say is that like this undercut, I mean, obviously you're only dealing with 2%. This one, all right, you see how that's a little bit less dark red in the background there? That's a less substantial undercut, our 24% against where the field is, than this is against the field's number. That's what I'm trying to illustrate. The reason for that is I'm using somebody else's ownership and I can't show it. Those of you who've been here before know that it's RG's ownership. Speaking of, mess over there. Any old RG heads in the crowd? They had one of those situations where, and you'll see this, anytime you see a big company come in and buy the website that you like, regardless of industry, say goodbye to the people that work there. And it's going to happen to the other websites that you guys like soon. Not this one. So far, this one's a one-man show. So if you like me, you can have me for a while. No outside interests here, but yeah, a lot of people, I think it was 100 some odd people got clipped from RG yesterday, including a lot of like the main touts. Jeremy Savage chiming in, LeBron wouldn't miss this game if his leg was broken. Yeah, again, first opportunity to play in Cleveland with Bronny, I don't see how he sits. Even if he's just sick and takes the court for a little bit and isn't at full strength, I think we're just there. Andy's here. Good afternoon, Andy. Good to see you, buddy. 31 of you guys out there. Like button, subscribe bell, all those things. 1,000 subscribers by the new year. Let's make that happen. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors. Go knock on their door. They'll think you're there campaigning for somebody. Tell them, hey, good news. I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. I'm here to tell you who to subscribe to on YouTube. But they can just turn off the notifications. They never have to worry about it again. Just do me a little favor and click the subscribe bell. Tell your mom, tell your dad, your uncles. Call your uncle. Say, hey, I don't want to talk about what happened at Thanksgiving. I just want you to follow this guy on YouTube. Helps out a little bit. The site is rotoscouts.com. Access to every single sport is under $1 a day. Let's keep on going here. Ben Simmons, 16% on the FanDuel slate. We got him just 2% on DraftKings. We're at the point where we're just kind of looking for FanDuel outliers again. Everybody here on DK at this point in the column is single-digit ownership. So like Tyrese Maxey, 10% on FanDuel, basically level with the field, 4%, a little bit of an undercut on DraftKings. Maxey's one of those players, though, if you want to fire up a few additional shares, no issues taking him up to like 10%. You can get a ceiling game out of Maxey. We got one in 47.8 minutes the other day, 59.8 FanDuel points. Very solid output, and he's still been behind his output for the season so far. 113 last year, 106 so far this year on the FanDuel scoring system. Kelly Oubre is a big FanDuel piece, not at all a big DraftKings piece. 64 on both sites, multi-position eligible on FanDuel at shooting guard and small forward, gives him a lot of flex. He's put up just 0.81 FanDuel points per minute so far, but it's been doing it on 24.9% usage. Last year, he was a 0.92 per minute guy on 22% usage. So presumably, these things will level back out to more along this with a little bit of additional output, 0.95. He can chase 1.0. On DraftKings for the 64 and small forward only, he really didn't hit. We're well below the field. The field's probably 10, 12% based on the 3% that we got to. Just a functional piece for Philly on DraftKings, but a big looking piece on FanDuel. Mikal Bridges, no real relevance. Neither site, 1% on FanDuel, 2% on DraftKings. Timmy Hardaway, not one of my favorites. 4,200, though, is very, very cheap for a guy playing 30 minutes. He's averaged 30.6. I've got him at 32 today. He's just bad. He gives you a lot of this. 33.5 minutes the other day. He put up 20.5 FanDuel points. 0.55 per minute for the season so far from Timmy. Last year, he was a 0.81 per minute player. If we get that version of that guy over 32 minutes for 4,200, that's a strong buy. But he just hasn't been that guy right now. He's also down to 13.7% usage in the reconfigured situation for him in Detroit. So really, really limited. Wasn't my favorite player in previous years. And based on that downturn in usage, I'm not carrying a lot of expectations. 20% and above the field, that's one where if I wanted to like level him off with the field, that's probably something I would do. I don't know that I would get myself necessarily overexposed to Timmy Hardaway. On DraftKings, you don't have to worry because we only got him 3% of the time or less than 3% of the time and below the field. Levine, Giddey, neither one really that relevant on either site. We did get 4% Levine. There's a little bit of ceiling there. 7,700. He's been a 1.07 per minute player. We talked about it the other day in the reconfigured Chicago offense. More room for him to create, more room for him to do Zach LaVine kind of things. And we've reaped the benefits so far. We're up by 0.13 FanDuel points per minute. We've seen a little bit more usage, and he's making the most of it. It's just he's correctly priced. 4.52 on the value scale. He is giving you a little bit of a value score on DraftKings. For 7,300, both shooting guard and small forward, we only got him 2% of the time. That's probably against, call it 10, 12% ownership again. It's a significant enough undercut to the field where with the ceiling for that player, that's when if you wanted to level off toward the field in the other direction. Again, no real issues with it because Zach LaVine does have a true ceiling. It's just not a great matchup against Orlando for him to go and really find that true ceiling. So I kind of like him right around where we're getting him. Have him a couple of times, but don't get overexposed on either side. Giddey's been a lot more relevant than this on FanDuel in the first few weeks. He's been fine, 1.15 per minute compared to 1.14 on almost exactly the same usage across seasons with different teams. He's Josh Giddey. He just looks like who he is. We did not get him in the Sims, so I don't really feel the need to press up on him. But if I see him land in a couple lineups, I'm not going to go take him out. Donovan Mitchell, high-end player, just 3% level with the field FanDuel. Barely got him one share basically on DraftKings at 85. Another guy, though, 5+ value score. It's just his 85 gets boxed out. Even with a good value score, he's just getting boxed out by significantly better ones up here. So it's not a situation where Donovan Mitchell is unplayable. It's not even a situation where he's not presenting good value and a ceiling and an appreciable ceiling for his salary. It's just there are better values at that position. But as I've said a bunch of times in the early part of the season here, player like that, and you can, there is math behind it and value numbers behind it when you go down the board, but fairly reliably with most superstar guys like Donovan Mitchell, most guys who can break off a 50 real-life point game, let's say, if they're coming up like this, where the value's there, The field's not overexposed to him. We're at only 0.67, but that's not a major undercut to the field. So figure the field is 2 to 5%. If you just wanted to take 10% and just put it over here of Donovan Mitchell, that's a big upside player. And it's not necessarily straight line through the sim, correct? But it is an offset. It is a differentiation piece with a high-end guy. Just know that you're doing it, and you're probably going to lose access to a high-end player because you're going to eliminate one of these value guys, and then you'd probably lose access to like a Trey, like a LaMelo, who both math out even better, even though we're undercutting both of those guys. Does that make sense? %12% of Kobe White, another member of the Bulls that we're getting less than the field. That's the most significant exposure on FanDuel that we've got to one of these Bulls. He put up one monster game and then some average games. He's been at 1.05 FanDuel, but that's up from 0.90 last year. He's an interesting enough piece. He didn't come up for us on DraftKings. I suspect it's just how his price and positioning is bouncing off some of that ownership. This is not a player where I would say that about. Good as he can be sometimes, we're only dealing with a 4.7 value score, right? So to illustrate that difference, 4.7 there versus 5.8 there, 5.08 there, I would press up on a couple extra shares of Donovan Mitchell in the right situation, where Kobe White, not necessarily. Everybody else doesn't look like we've got any overly relevant guys. Jaylen Brown came up 6% of the time on FanDuel, not at all on DraftKings. That's a player you can go get a little bit extra of. Maybe not super duper star caliber, but a solid 1.25 this year, 1.29 on DraftKings. Last year, 1.13. He's seen a little bit more usage so far this year, 28.3 last year, 32.4 this year. Halliburton, disappointment so far this season, 0.95 per minute. That's way down. The usage hasn't gone anywhere. He's still Tyrese. I expect all the production will come back, but matching up against Boston is probably not the right night to go chase it. So I'm glad he didn't really come up. Just got him level with the field in the low single digits on FanDuel. Same thing with Darius Garland, low single digits. Nobody else at the board. Let's jump to some forwards. Oh, weird. I got some naming issues with Patty Williams and Roddy and Jokic. Ah, that's annoying. Why would Roddy have not gone through the... Huh. That's a little weird. So, David Roddy, I've got him just at 20 minutes. He played 19 last night, put up 25.2 FanDuel points. He comes back today at 4,000. Didn't get him at all on the FanDuel slate. But regardless of how these guys sorted out, these four guys seem to be missing from the sim. I don't see him being relevant on DraftKings. At 3,500, there's a chance with a 4.75 value score that David Roddy would have pulled a few shares. I don't think it's overly significant because we do have all these guys before we got to him. It would be like... I think he's probably boxed out by most of this. He would be one guy to keep in mind. And I'll rerun DraftKings after the show. If you're in Discord, by the way, jump into Discord. If you're not, if you're in Discord, I'll let you know if he came up. Not sure why he didn't go through the sim on DK. These other guys I'm not worried about. I don't think there's enough value there. So to do the late night guys first on FanDuel. Actually, let's do it the other way around. We'll come back up for the late night guys. Makes more sense that way. So starting with both slates. We talked about AD already. He's a center only on DraftKings, but he's on the board right now because we're sorted by FanDuel positioning, which is really annoying. Center and power forward eligible on FanDuel. We got him 11% of the time on the FanDuel slate. That is above the field. But it's not nearly as significant as the 46.6% we got to him on DraftKings. He's 1,000 less expensive on DraftKings. Looks like a dominant piece, 5.44%, 5.44 on the value scale. Again, that's against centers, but keep him in mind as we talk this through. That's a major, major pay-up guy. Boncaro, 15% on FanDuel, but a sub-5 value score on the FanDuel scale. FanDuel got aggressive about his price. He's at 97. If he has another good one, he's probably shooting into the 10s. Last time out, if you missed it, 39.6 minutes, 84.1 FanDuel points. Beast. 1.44 per minute so far this season. Do I think that he's suddenly a superstar and he's gained 0.3 points per minute output? Probably not to that degree. But do I think there's going to be a noteworthy ongoing increase in his output? Call it, maybe 1.25, 1.3? Yeah, I'm starting to think so. 9,100 on DraftKings. Different price point. Power forward only over there, 42% of the top 150. Looks like we've got a very clear pool of front runner core type guys. With AD, with Boncaro, with those 3 value guards on the DraftKings slate. I'm fairly confident saying you can easily put those 5 guys together and then just thread options through the other positions. So if you're into the idea of a core, those guys are definitely interesting for that. Rui at 6,200 on FanDuel only hit the board 2.6% of the time, level with the field. But another guy just offset by price, 62 at both forward spots on FanDuel, 54 both forward spots on DraftKings. Doing us a little favor over there. Rui's been decent. He's seeing a 1 additional percentage point of usage, but he's done a lot with it. 0.93 per minute on DraftKings, 0.92 on FanDuel. That's up from 0.85 FanDuel last year. Last time out, 31 and change minutes, 39 and change FanDuel points. Thank you very much. There's been value there. He's been playing nearly 36 minutes a night. I've got him at 36 for tonight, 35-7. Zaire Williams, an interesting piece. He didn't come up in the guards conversation before because he's a small forward only on FanDuel, but he's a shooting guard only on DraftKings. So that is yet another major, major piece of value on the guard among the guards on DraftKings. I'm going to pull that back up so you guys can see where Zaire slots in. Are there any others? Let's see. Forward, he's got guard. I think that's the only one that was missing from that guard conversation because of the positioning difference. So at 38 on FanDuel, we really didn't get much Zaire Williams. 2.67%. But there's just missing bodies galore for Brooklyn right now. He played 22 minutes last night, put up 28.6 FanDuel points. On DraftKings, he only cost 3,200 at shooting guard. We got him as a major, major piece, just a free square of value. 30%. I'm a loser till I win the Millie says I'll stay away from Zaire Williams. Yeah, that's also not a terrible decision. You're talking about a guy who was a 0.79 per minute player last year on 19.2% usage. Spiked up to 1.05 in small samples in the early going this season. He's going to go back down. It's just about buying the 20-ish minutes, 22, 20 minutes for 3,200. There is a lot you can do with that purchasing power. So he slots right in with these other guards on this slate. I still do prefer these 3 guys for a little bit bigger of an investment, but he's definitely your free square spot of the day at the guard position on DraftKings. By comparison, you'd have to jump down to here, $3,300 Garrison Matthews for a comparable option as far as the price goes. Matthews is 100 more at shooting guard, projected for right around the same. Was that a 2/3 of a point less? And we got him at a 4% rate and lower than the field versus 30%. So that's the power of that just free square for value. Yeah, again, Millie, I got no issues with going away from Zaire Williams. It's a low faith play. It's not even I think he's going to necessarily even hit his median kind of a play. It is just the idea of the 22 minutes for the 3,200 at shooting guard. You do that, you buy back any points that somebody else might have scored you and more with whatever it accesses. Looks like Mamba's taken L.A. Cleveland, New York Miami, and Boston Indy off of his player pool, or his power pool, however we want to call it. That's not something I typically do, just to put it out there. It's just it's so math driven, and it's so condensed down to the right plays anyway, that I really have never felt the need to take things out of a basketball pool. You could set a rule for, like, don't give me anybody projected under 10 fantasy points. You could set a rule for don't give me anybody projected under 14 minutes, and kind of take care of some of those things. Mamba's not doing that. Yeah, Power was doing that. Well, you said good call about something. But yeah, that's not an approach that I typically will take. I'll typically have the full pool in there and let fly with that, because it can cause you to miss some opportunities. Do you really want to say, hey, I'm going to fully exclude Anthony Davis from being able to land in some of my lineups? I'm going to fully exclude all of the Knicks, moderate values. Not that we've seen Knicks really hitting the board hard here. Boston, you want to take Jason Tatum out of your life completely? I don't know. I like leaving myself the ability to access those players, even if they don't look great. Somebody mentioned Wemby earlier. He came up in just 2% of the top 150 on the FanDuel slate. And that is not at all where we were, but just to throw it out there since I just noticed it, he's down significantly, 0.35 per minute reduction in output so far. I have no concerns about Wemby. He's going to go back to the absolute smasher that he was last season. But just since he caught my eye as we were up there, and I knew somebody had mentioned it. We're sorted, right? Yeah. All right. So going back to these forwards, we had gotten as far as Zaire Williams here. Hunter, if he goes, doesn't really look like a main piece on the FanDuel slate for 5,800, both forward spots. We only got him under 5%, basically around the field. DraftKings were around the field, but at 23% because he's 5,300 over there. Basically just need him to suit up. He's a 20% usage guy. He had a big uptick in his 2 games played so far to 1.13 FanDuel points, 1.12 DraftKings points. He's more like the 0.82, 0.85 kind of output guy that we saw last year, but definitely plenty for him to do if he's wearing a uniform and on the court today. So on DraftKings, fire away. No issues with getting him around the field, 25-ish%, 20 to 25 across a portfolio. Jalen Johnson, pretty significant piece on both sites from that same Atlanta team. 36% exposure, way above the field on FanDuel at a 5.19 value score. On DraftKings, 22%, right around the field. Definitely a player with some upside, 1.03 on DraftKings and FanDuel so far this season. He's seen an uptick in usage, 18.4 up to 21.7. So presumably we go higher because he's right now below last year's 1.07 output. So into the 1.15 kind of a range on the right night. We just can't. So I'm coming off a monster, 38.8 minutes, 56.9 FanDuel points. So we know there's definite ceiling there. Caleb Martin, kind of a meh. He comes up. He's cheap, 5,600 at both forward spots on FanDuel. Puts him on the board as one of those just mid-grade building blocks. He's a relatively low usage guy, 16.8 last year, spiked up to 19.8 so far this year, but hasn't gained any ground in terms of the fantasy scoring output in his 3 games. 30.9 fantasy points in 36.5 minutes the other day. Again, he's meh as far as his actual quality goes. I wouldn't expect much ceiling out of Caleb Martin, but definitely looks like a playable piece on both sides. We got a little bit more of him than the field on FanDuel, a little bit less of him than the field where he's a little bit more popular on DraftKings. 22% exposure, but a little under the cut to the field at 5,100. Richard, another guy who's benefiting from missing bodies in Atlanta, 30%, and this is with Hunter in. Significant value square at 4,400 and small forward eligibility on the FanDuel slate. On DraftKings, he's 4,400, 19% level with the field. So looking like a little bit stronger of a value play against the field on FanDuel. But definitely a key piece on DraftKings. Same exact exposure to $4,000 Cody Martin on DraftKings. Probably chewing up a little bit of Richard because he's 4,000 shooting guard and small forward eligible. But both of those guys right around the field, right around 20-ish%. Definitely building block type players. These two guys are somewhat swappable with some of those other guys that were at the top of that guard spot, that 3 or 4 man group that we were looking at. These guys would be reasonable pivots from those guys. Similar-ish kind of value-based potential. And we got to them. Cam Johnson, we talked about him as a significant piece yesterday. It looks like he comes back, at least on FanDuel, as a significant piece again. 36% exposure above the field. He's only 56 over there, both forward spots. 5+ value score. Gave us 38.9 and 39.8 yesterday. A little bit of a palindrome there. 19% usage last year, down to 17.3% in a small sample of 4 games. That'll probably level off. It's taken him down to 0.82 FanDuel points per minute, 0.84 DraftKings points per minute. We got him 16% of the time and below the field on the DK slate. If you want to level that off with the field, it's not a tragic mistake. He does have a solid value score. A lot of 5+ guys at the forward spot on DraftKings, by the way. Really kind of interchangeable parts through a lot of these guys. A lot of commonality with the field. A lot of common pieces, parts, positioning, and price, to get alliterative about it. Corey Kispert, 31 minutes projected in 34.5. He put up 29.3 FanDuel points. The 31 minutes is a slight uptick from his typical minutes output with missing bodies in Washington. Just 0.68 per minute so far on just 16.6% usage, but I think we can realistically expect both of those things to climb somewhat tonight. And last year on 19% usage, he was a 0.80 per minute guy. So there's realistic expectation, 0.80, 0.85, somewhere in that neighborhood, and some minutes on him. For 49 on FanDuel, he comes up 18% of the time. We're level with the field, 12%, and below the field on DraftKings for the same price, so that's a higher relative price. He's just okay on DK, really just okay on both sides, but a relevant player. A guy comes up in the mid-teens on both. Noah Clowney snuck into the starting lineup late yesterday. Played 15-6, put up 8.1 FanDuel points. If you had him, you weren't too happy that you went to him. Comes back at 4,200 today. I've got him projected for 22. Nick Claxton out for that team. Looking for some size. He's seen 20% usage over the course of the first 4 games while playing just 17 minutes a night so far. That's up from 13.7%, but I mean, we're not exactly talking about that kind of a player. 0.83 per minute so far this season. I figure right around there. We did get him 12% of the time on FanDuel. Power forward and center eligible on both sites. 3,700 on DraftKings. We got him below the field at 12.6. I have no issues taking the punt on that position. I think it's a low-end spot. I think you could see another day where we're a little bit over on these minutes and he plays just 15, 16, 17 minutes again. And even if he gets his 20, his 22, not the best contributor. So I'm kind of not overly enthused about that one. I would probably bring that one back down more toward the field, I think. Unless it's buying you something really significant. It does play better for value on DraftKings. 5.34 value score over there versus 4.83 on FanDuel. Franz Wagner looking like a different piece across sites. 7,500 both forward spots on FanDuel, 7,200 small forward only on DraftKings. We got him a little bit on DK, where he's been a 1.30 per minute player so far this season. We got a lot more of him, and we're well ahead of the field on him on FanDuel. That's an interesting piece. He's put up 1.26 per minute on a slight uptick in usage so far this year. On 25% usage last year, though, he was a 1.05 per minute player. So I think we got to have a little bit of, realistic view toward what his actual production is going to look like. I don't think we've made this leap. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he continues that kind of output all season and we get a lot more excited about him as the season goes on. But right now, it just looks like a fair piece of value. Got him, a little bit more than 1 in 5 on DraftKings. RJ Barrett, not looking like a significant piece at all on the FanDuel slate for 74. 66 on DraftKings has him in lineups. I think this is about a third of the public projected popularity that this ran against. Memory serves, he was like upper 20s into the 30s DraftKings ownership. So we got a big haircut on RJ shares. Basically around a point per minute output the other day. That's the one game he's played all season. He's basically around a point per minute player overall. I would expect around a point per minute from RJ Barrett tonight if you play him. He's fine, but since we're getting so much less of him than the field, it looks like, stuff a couple shares in your pocket and then walk away kind of a spot. Let the field grab the extra 20%. The major upside days for RJ Barrett are kind of few and far between. DFS got him a little bit, 17% on FanDuel, just 8% on DraftKings. Only 4,200 over there, another value square, 45 over here, no center eligibility. But really not bouncing off the price or the positioning all that effectively. 8% were below the field, figure the field's 10-12. Tatum, 7%, figure the field's again 10-12 there. If you wanted to double this exposure and take 15% Jason Tatum, it's not a mistake. One of the few guys projected for 50 points with clear upside to call it 80. Let's put up 1.50 FanDuel, 1.53 DraftKings so far this season. I've got RJ for 30 power. So I'm not sure if they're going to run that for a few weeks or whatever. But yeah, if we max out at 30, that's got him right where he is. So again, we're dealing with a pretty significant undercut. Down the board a little bit here. Again, we're getting into single-digit territory in your DraftKings, guys. There's a couple big haircuts, though. 6% of Tobias Harris. 3% at 5,500 of Onyeka Okongwu, who I have at 26, and I have Capella at 22 today. 2.6% of $6,400 Kelly Oubre, who we've already talked about, is a big piece on FanDuel, but not so much on DraftKings. 2.6 with an undercut on Ben Simmons. I have no issues with that. Happy to leave shares of Ben Simmons on the table, quite honestly. Levine, we've talked about. Santi Aldama, 1%. I figure the field's probably 5-8%, somewhere in there. 4.82 value. Once we're below 5, I don't really see the need to push the issue on value. Among the guys we haven't discussed who are differentiated on FanDuel, Tatum we got more of. 14% and ahead of the field. I like that a lot on the FanDuel slate and would be happy to take it up to 20%. If I can grab a bigger advantage on a player with a ceiling like Jason Tatum without really hurting my downside, I'm happy to take a few additional points of Tatum there. Tobias is a big piece on FanDuel. 5+ value score, 6,000 at both forward spots. He's the same price on DraftKings. That's why we didn't get much of him over there relative to the field. FanDuel, we got a little bit more than the field, but it looks like he's going to be very popular over there. Oubre, we've talked about. LeBron, we just got 5% FanDuel, 3% DraftKings. If you want to take a little bit more LeBron playing in Cleveland, there's no concerns here. Timmy, we've talked about. Simmons, 0.85 per minute out of Ben Simmons so far this season on 15% usage, 12% usage in his limited action last year with a 1.11. If Ben Simmons is your guy, feel free. He is in no way mine. Josh Hart, we got a little bit more than the field, but sub 5% on FanDuel, 2% and below the field on DraftKings. Very good hustle piece, collector of fantasy points with a little bit of scoring edge on the right day. Put up 38.6 in 37.8 minutes the other night. If you get that for your 63 on FanDuel, you're doing okay. Nobody else overly significant. Looks like a haircut on... that's Aldama. I talked about him already. Jarrett Allen, we didn't get any of on DraftKings. 2% on FanDuel. Jimmy Butler, not a relevant piece to either slate. Miles Bridges is an outlier, though. 6,800 both forward. We got nearly 15% of them level with the field on FanDuel. A little bit of an undercut by not getting any of them on the DraftKings slate, but it's not a significant one. Low owned on both. Desmond Bane, Triple J, no relevance really. 2% of Grant Williams down there. 4% on Levine. 6% Alex Sarr. Only 2% of them on the DraftKings slate. It's another person who could benefit, though, from missing bodies in Washington. The output's not here. I didn't do the naming. This one we actually do have a naming table for. Oh, is he in here already? Oh, he is in here already. All I need to do is that. 27 points in his last game, 27 minutes. He's playing 24 and change a night. I've got him up to 28 today, expecting this kind of output. He's been a 0.98 per minute player on just 16.2% usage so far, 0.91 on DraftKings. But kid looks decent, at least as a not overly expensive square that you can kind of build into some lineups. He's just a mid-board play. He's not anybody to run off and get excited about, but he did come up a little bit on FanDuel. And then going back to the guys who are not on the DraftKings slate at these positions, Jalen Williams, Jalen with an EN, just 4.6% with an undercut to the field on FanDuel. High-end player. If you got a little bit more than that, took him up to around 10, it was probably still going to be a significant enough undercut. It gives you a little bit bigger of a bite at a very good player. But the Sims are telling us to have a little, but undercut. 1.12 so far this season on FanDuel. Just a couple shares of Brandon Ingram, a couple shares of Wemby, no Zion whatsoever. 7.3% of Draymond, who last night, 28.5 minutes, 26.1 FanDuel points. He's been a 0.83 per minute player. No real appeal in Draymond today. Is who he is kind of a spot. Norm Powell was the outlier at 27%, and then we got 11% of Herb Jones, but he's no longer on the slate, so keep that in mind. He's out for tonight, so that'll go away. What's the New Orleans impact at this position? So maybe we see a couple additional for Javonte Green there. Had him at 18. I got to reconfigure that. It's not one that I was thinking about with CJ and Herb Jones coming out of there. So I'll reconfigure that in the next update, and we'll get it running. But maybe you see a couple additional minutes trickle that way. It's probably going to be a big trickle-down effect for everybody, but I'll call it out in Discord if there's a noteworthy price option. Aldam is so confusing. He's like a faster version of slow-mo. Aldam is sneaky and Pippen of Morant out. Yeah, Scottie Pippen I'm all over if John Morant is out. That was a play that I had the other day. I built him into lineups. I was ahead of the Cody Williams play yesterday too, but then he ended up starting and I had a lock and people got to him. Anything come down news-wise in the last little bit? 5:09. No new news since that last New Orleans news, but we're coming up on the 5:30 update in a little bit. Let's jam through centers here, and then I'll go get things updated. I'll pull up the Ace Mine lineups, though, so you guys can get a little bit of a feel for like how these lineup constructions looked. All right, for this, I'm going to do it a little differently. I'm going to pull up the center-only guys first on FanDuel, because this is always an interesting exercise. Joe Val is pulling a 33% share. That's above, but not massively above. So the field's probably in the high 20s on Joe Val. Looking like kind of an interesting square. 5.55 value rating. He's only playing low 20s minutes. That's kind of the issue, though. He was a 1.20 per minute player. He's at 1.04 so far this season. But if we kick him into the 25-minute range, he probably shows even more upside. So no issues with that. But we got 33% going there. 26% going to Jakob Poeltl, who's one of the other more highly owned centers on the slate. We're basically even with the field there. That's 59% of our ownership. There's another 8 and 7% there. That's up to 76% going with center-only guys. And there's another 8. And then just filling around the edges. But that gets us to 85. So there's only limited shares at center on FanDuel for guys who are center and power forward eligible. 85-ish% with a few more percentage points in there. And call it about 90. .6%. So there's only about 10-12 percentage shares to move some of those power forward guys and like triple up on a true power forward with those multi-position eligible guys. But right now, by far, our leaders for center shares on the FanDuel slate among center-only guys, and this tells me that it'll be among the center and power forward-only guys when we resort, Jakob Poeltl and Joe Val. Very, very significant pieces. Ayton landed in 8%, Zubac in 7.3%. Those guys are just kind of odds and ends plays from games that aren't on the DK slate. Zubac has been at 1.27 per minute, and Ayton has been at 1.03 per minute. That's a major uptick for Zubac that he probably doesn't hang on to as the season goes on. He's also seen a gigantic uptick in usage so far, 16.5 up to 24.5%. So that's where that upgrade in output came from. But if you get that kind of a day from him, that's a nice little square at 7,200. Now to put those guys back on the board. So among center and power forward guys from the games that aren't on the DraftKings slate, we got basically nobody else relevant. Draymond, who, again, wasn't overly relevant. And then 2% of Wemby, which, with Wemby, if you want to take a bigger share, 10%, and get a little bit ahead of what doesn't look like much public ownership, that's another spot you could just potentially leverage up. But you're doing it as a very expensive proposition when he doesn't math out all that well at 11-1. We've talked about AD a few times, but again, top of the board on DraftKings center only, 46%, well above the field. 40%, though, and level with the field of $6,300 Jakob Poeltl over there. He's a big piece on both sites, but a bigger piece on the DraftKings slate, it looks like. If you want to take a few additional shares, based on the shading in that square, we're probably slightly ahead. The field's probably 38%, and we're 2-3 points ahead. But a few additional on top of that, even from Poeltl, I don't really mind. 1.05 per minute on FanDuel, 1.06 on DraftKings, but had an additional tenth of a point per minute on top of that last year. Got up to that. No, that's right around still 1.05. 40 minutes, 40.2, 41.8 FanDuel points. But a good contributor. Nick Richards didn't get him at all on the FanDuel slate, 0% at 5,700. Just got boxed out by all those better centers. He is still a 5.1 value option, though. So it's not like he's not returning points per dollar value. It's just you do have much better options at the position. On DraftKings, though, $4,800 Nick Richards got into 30.6% of our top 150, basically level with the field. Looks like a good value square at a different price on DK. It's been a 1.0 on the nose player so far this year. Drummond at 8% on FanDuel. Obviously, we know there are 50-point days for Andre Drummond. He's been hovering in the 1.16 territory, but last year, in smaller chunks, he was at a 1.37 player. Getting the run that he is probably having a little bit of an impact, but we will spike a couple big games before it's all said and done out of Andre Drummond. 16% exposure on DK, under the field, but definitely exposed. Half the ownership on FanDuel, level with the field. We talked about Clowney already. He's just an okay piece, 12.67% on both sites. That's slightly above on FanDuel. That's slightly below on DraftKings. Just a different play because he's 3,700 versus 4,200. Miles Turner, just watched the status. He was questionable last I saw. Just got 1% of them on FanDuel, 4% of them on DraftKings. No big impact either way. Okongwu were below the field on both sites. Further below probably on DraftKings at 3% than our 6% is relative to the field on FanDuel. He's a good per minute guy. 1.18 per minute on 18% usage so far in his 3 games this year. Was out for the last one, back for this one. Again, I've got it, they basically split that position kind of down the middle with a slight lean toward Okongwu now. So 26, 22 minute share, but it could easily turn into a 24, 24 dead even split. But he's the preferred center if you're going to Atlanta. Jalen Duren, minor impact, 2.67% of him on DraftKings. Chris Boucher, we didn't talk about because he's center power forward on FanDuel, power forward only on DraftKings. $3,800 Boucher. He's showing a little bit of a value score. He's probably owned around 5%, 8% by the field. We're at 2.67 in our sim, and I'm pretty happy with that. Boucher really, really needs to get out there for elevated run to really pay anything off. He's been a 1.14 per minute player so far this season. That's an uptick from 0.98 last year, again on a FanDuel scale. And he's a lower end player on DraftKings. That 1.14 FanDuel is a 1.06 on DraftKings score. Joval, we touched on DraftKings. Joval barely came up. He's 5,800 over there. So he's more expensive against the DraftKings cap than he is against the FanDuel cap. And with the ability to roster 2 centers, we still didn't get him. 1.3% exposure, well below the field. Well below the field on Santi, who we talked about again. Nobody else really that relevant. 2% of Evan Mobley if you want him. He's got power forward eligibility, which is nice because you can grab him, stack him up with a center-only guy. 2% of him, 2% of his running mate, Jared Allen, on FanDuel. Neither guy came up all that much on DraftKings. 1% of Karl Anthony Towns. 0 on DraftKings. It's a little undercut to the field on DraftKings. We're about level with the field on FanDuel. That's a guy, when we talk about do you want to take the Knicks off the slate, like Power was saying before, losing access to Cat. Not that he's really showing much here. Not that he's really been, a dominant force so far for the Knicks. He's putting up 116 so far on FanDuel. That's basically the same as he did on less usage last year. Or more usage last year, excuse me. So he's been good. It's just, does he claw back a few points of usage with the Knicks and get himself into the 22 to 24% up from this 18%? It's kind of hamstringing him right now. Bam, not a factor. Jared Allen, Triple J, Clint Capella, Al Horford. None of these guys really landed relevant. Obviously, any one of those guys, any of this group of players in the mid-20s to mid-30s, as far as minutes projection goes, these guys can impact the slate. Nobody's saying Evan Mobley can't impact the slate. Nobody's saying Bam couldn't go out there and put up a 60-point night and have an impact. But how we've got it projected, how it all mass out against the salary, the other options at the positions, this is what it's looking like. Last time out, Bam put up 47 in 34.8 minutes. He was a 1-2-2 player last year. He's only at 1.06 on 6 points less usage so far this season. That's probably another one that bounces back before it's all said and done. Only 3 games into his season. But really not showing much right now. Power saying, I see Charlotte. I auto-play the big against them. It's not a terrible approach. That's one thing definitely that's helping Pirtle look pretty solid today. That 5.47 value score on FanDuel, though, is just super appealing. Joval slightly ahead of that in terms of the value. And on FanDuel, we did get a little bit more Joval. And we were basically even with the field on the 26% of Pirtle that we got. So if you wanted to take Pirtle, you'd have to push up beyond that range and get into the 30s on him to get an advantage on the field. Considering that the Joval share in the 30s is not all that far ahead of the field, so you're not really gaining. You're gaining a little bit, but it's not like your biggest lever on the slate. If you wanted to just reverse those and take 26% Joval and 33% of Jakob Pirtle so that you're a little bit ahead of the field on Pirtle and probably level or maybe even a little bit below the field on Joval, I think that's perfectly fine. Male Nurses Rock 2, what's up, buddy? The Morning Grind. Whose is that? Miles Turner out. Just hoping to get that news after the thing here. So that'll be an impact. Let's see. Let me close this. Get to Indy. Come on. Waiting for the baseball file to close. There we go. All right, so Turner, we're going to keep an eye on the starters, but presumably there will be a bump to Ike Jackson, who was already all right and is very, very cheap at $3,800 at center only on DraftKings. It's $4,800 on the FanDuel slate. I already had him at like a 1.1. He was a 1.26 per minute player last season. He's the kind of guy that just typically needs to get on the court at these value prices and then becomes a dominant force. So that's one I'll reproject, I'll rerun, and I'll let you guys know where we end up in Discord. Probably a couple extra front court minutes now for Obi. Siakam he's at 34 already. It's not a direct impact, but maybe just required to play a little bit more. But yeah, probably Jackson. I think top of my head is the biggest beneficiary there. And then guys that I didn't have projected. Let's see. Wiseman's dead. Is James Johnson alive? Let's see. Has Johnson played? Shout it out if there's somebody super obvious that I'm not thinking of. Who are the other bodies on this team? All right, it looks like James Johnson is alive. He played 4 minutes so far this season. Reese Boyd, let's be sexy tonight. Yes, I like that idea. Let's get it. Yeah, a lot of value today, Mamba. Absolutely. Male nurses, what's the morning grind comment? Was that for the playing the bigs against Charlotte? Whose show is that? Is that RG's show? It's not an Awesome show. I know that. RG. Yeah, over the years, I've consumed so little of their content, but they've always just been like the big monolith kind of lurking in the background. I was talking about the cuts that they did earlier in the show, and we're basically done here. Let me pull up Ace Mind. But I was talking about the cuts that they made, the staff cuts that they made, just because, again, anytime you see a corporate entity take over an independent site like that, it's only a matter of time before your favorite people are gone, and appears to be what just happened over at RG. And I think there was a big impact on like back office folks and stuff like that, which is usually the unspoken part of that. You lose 5 content creators, but you lose 150 people from the back office who aren't making as much money. But yeah, definitely a lot of churn in the industry. Not sure what they're doing as far as who's on shows and what their talent is, or like who's left over there. But it's also a space I try and stay out of as far as the politics and the back and forth in the industry. And this guy hates that guy, and this guy said something about that guy's bet, so they don't talk anymore. And there was a Twitter beef, and like, who gives a shit? I never followed it. I never cared. So these are some of your DraftKings lineups. The percentages, the results are all, what we're working with during the show. This is just to give an idea of what's coming up. So like I said, the idea of grabbing a few additional shares of Jason Tatum, even though he doesn't necessarily always math out as the top, grab more of him than the field, Tatum on an upside can get you into that top spot. AD was our go-to. So some AD, Paolo, Tatum, with a Nembhard value square, a Curry value square, a Clowney value square, a Zaire Williams value square, and a Cam Johnson mid-board type guy. So that is a extreme 3 pay-ups, 1 mid-board, and everybody else value construction. That next one down does have 2 stars in it with AD and Moncaro, but it's much more of a balanced lineup. You got Nembhard on the front end. You got Trey Mann, who's a value guy. Richard is a value guy. Caleb, Joval, Dennis Schroeder all land more in that mid-range. So what we're doing there basically is sacrificing the third star caliber big pay up to level out 3 spots. So it's a 1-for-3 trade between those lineups basically. But they do still, they are both constructions hyper competitive with one another at the top of the board. Ignore that Turner one. That's obviously going away. So you can see how Nembhard and Trey Mann are both hitting the guard spots pretty hard. And that was 2 guys out of that group of the small core of guards that we talked about. Rui's on here a decent amount. There's an RJ that snuck through. I feel like we didn't mention Cade Cunningham. I just kind of referred to that game as like you can take some of the top end guys, but where did Cade actually math out? Cade might have gotten lost in the shuffle as far as the different positions across different sites. No, he's point guard only. He must have been there and I skipped over him. We got him 10% of the time, which was level with the field on DraftKings for 87 point guard only. 8,800 point guard only, 2% also level with the field on FanDuel. But he's a guy who could go out and spike a little bit of an upside game. 46.6 FanDuel points in 34.9 minutes the other day. 1.24 per minute on the season. Just going to scroll through some of these. A lot of Pirtle back and forth with the AD shares. They're just kind of bouncing between there in the util spot. Some Nick Richards is creeping through on DraftKings into some of these top lineups. Yeah, Richards was a 30% exposed guy on DraftKings for 4,800 center only and level with the field. So makes sense we're seeing a fair amount of him and seeing shares of him competitive with some of the bigger centers. And he's a value square. He's a guy that helps buy. Lots of purchasing power on this slate. There's LaMelo. We talked about him as a significant guard piece. Probably we'll see if we continue to scroll down. It looks like the top lineups are taking value at the guard spots. Spending a little bit at one of the forwards. Spending for sure at center, whether it goes here or over here in the util. And then spending primarily, Paulos, Franz. Yeah, and then taking like one more of a spendy spot. But we have to scroll down. Despite getting them a lot, Donovan Mitchell, LaMelo Ball, some of the bigger name guards that did come up are buried a little further down the board. Here's some more LaMelos, for example. Some more Donovans. Some Jalen. So some of those guys got boxed out of shares, and the best of the best lineups in this top 150, the best of the best, almost exclusively used value plays at the guard spots. I think that's the most interesting thing that we can find on this sim. That really informs top-end construction on DraftKings. So hopefully that helps a little bit there. I'm going to pull up FanDuel in a sec. Here's the bottom end of that, though, so you guys can see some lineups. I do not encourage you to take these lineups, but if you do, play them well. And speak well of me if you win. Picking up the FanDuel board. Jalen Brunson sneaking into the top lineup despite minimal exposure. Ugh, Timmy Hardaway in there too, though. I hate that lineup. Yeah, that's just ugly. Ugh. Jalen in the second lineup too. Trey, let's see, is that second one better? Trey, Jalen, Keyshawn George, Jordan Hawkins, Cam Johnson, Richard, Tatum, Ben Simmons. I don't like either of those top two lineups just on a eyeball test. Obviously, they math out just fine, but eyeball test-wise, woof, those are ugly. I love getting to Jason Tatum in both of them. I like the idea that you can get Tatum plus a couple other high-end players. But, man, those are some lineups that could really underwhelm. FanDuel looks like it is all over the place. So the center spot is interesting, and it's mostly interesting because out of all those shares that were going to Joval and Pirtle, there's one Pirtle, there's a Joval, but look at all the Drummonds and Horfords and a Zubac, Clowney. I was expecting this to be almost straight line at the top between Joval and Pirtle, and it's really not, which is kind of surprising the way those two players came up on FanDuel. That's a lot more spread out than I would have thought. So that means, again, that a lot of those shares ended up in the lower end. Not that we didn't get those guys up here, but I was expecting more of those guys than the rest of the guys, and it's really just mixed going down the slate, and then more Joval, Pirtle in the bottom end of the top 150. Power says Obi will have fun tonight too. Yeah, that'll definitely be. Oh, DeAndre Hunter ruled out. That's another one that'll pick up. So just that Atlanta value is going to be present, just like we've seen it the last couple of days. So definitely interesting. Looks like Mamba got similar results. Me too. Very surprising the way that sim came out, mashing a new crunch now. So here's some of your FanDuel stuff outside of the center spot. Looks like there's definite spend at power forward between the Paolo shares, the Tatum shares, and then basically everybody else is at worst like mid. Right, like your Jalen Johnsons of the world, some Ben Simmons, some Tobias Harris. So there's an appreciable spend there. Small forward is going back and forth, it looks like. A lot of, 1-on-1 value guy, pay up guy. Shooting guard looks almost exclusively 1-1. And then it does look like you have the ability to double pay up at point guard today. Right? Brunson, Maxey, Trey Brunson, Maxey, Trey, Harden, Buddy. This is your first pay down spot, Poole and Trey Mann. And then that one yielded upside through power forward and Paolo there. Interesting on FanDuel today. It's going to be fun to wrestle with. That said, hour and a half in, looks like the numbers are dwindling a little bit as we get down toward the end of the show. I know there's a lot going on out there and people got to go build lineups, so I got to get the projections accurate. Thank you guys so much for hanging out all this time. Makes it fun. Beats sitting here talking to myself. I'll say that. Hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe bell if you haven't already. Check out rotoscouts.com if you haven't already. Every single plan under $1 a day. Weekly, monthly, and quarterly plans available. So you're talking about $6 and change for a weekly, 20, low 20s, 22, I think, for a monthly. It is inexpensive, and it gives you access to NBA, NHL, NFL, and right now MLB. Hopefully for a couple more days. Let's go Yankees. So if you sign up today for a weekly, you want to give me a shot, see how it goes. For $6 and change, you're going to get full main slate content for NFL this weekend. You get the last few baseball games of the year. You'll get every NHL main slate between now and a week from today. You get every NBA main slate between now and a week from today for $1 a day. Sound like a good deal? I think so. Especially when other sites are purging all your favorite content creators, charging you $300-$400 a month to access one sport, let alone 4 sports. Trying to provide the best value I can. acemind.io is what we're looking at here with our sim results. Check those guys out as well. Promo code ROTOSCOUTS, all in caps, gets you 20% off your first month over at AceMind. Best bang for your buck if you're looking for a sim tool. I'm telling you guys. Check them out. Otherwise, no other sponsors. Drink Cape May IPAs. If I can get some free Cape May out of this, that'd be great. With that, guys, let me go update some projections. I'll get them up on the site. Give me 10, 15 minutes or so, and we'll be good to go there. I'll rerun some sims. I'll let you know how things came out in the Discord. And any questions or anything like that going forward, just jump into the Discord and ask. I think I put a link in the chat before. I'll drop another one in just in case. So there's our Discord. That'll take you direct to basketball. With that said, guys, good luck out there tonight. Somebody go win something. Come on back tomorrow for more basketball and a football showdown show. And we're going to get a football main slate show in here somewhere this week. See you guys.